Welcome to the final session of the day. As Evie said, you made it. She actually took my line. I was going to gracefully call people out that are probably cleaning their house and doing all the things before the kids get off the bus or to wrap up the end of their workday. We get it. We've been there. Virtual is a challenge. But one of the things we love most about Sources of Strength is the interactive piece. So if you can hang in there with us, we would greatly appreciate us. Evie, we were going to introduce ourselves. Well, I'm Jennie Canganelli from the ESC of Northeast Ohio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly Jacobson. I am part of the Student Wellness Department at the ESC of Northeast Ohio. I'm also an Ohio Certified Prevention Consultant. I've been doing sources, ooh, 5.5 years. I've been a local trainer for sources, and so we have some experience with it. It's a good time. I love it. It's,
And
don't
as
tell
I,
anybody else, but it's like one of the best parts of our job because we have
for,
lots of hats, but this is like the best.
for sure. And like Holly said, we work for the ESC of Northeast Ohio. We're part of the student wellness team, which we came on board there a few years ago, and it has been a wonderful transition. Holly and I do all things prevention in schools. We are also both licensed school counselors. We get to go in and work with young people and teach them things about how to be safe online, a lot of social media education. We've been diving into Senate Bill 288 education and raising awareness. But Sources is definitely has a special place in both of our hearts now more than ever as we see students and schools and communities, still struggling about reaching out for help and hope. And we have just gotten to meet so many wonderful, wonderful young people and adults across, I will say, Northern Ohio, not just Northeastern Ohio, even, as we've been able to train many, many schools in the Sources of Strength secondary model. Please, as we go through this, feel free to ask questions in the chat, unmute, interact with us. If you've ever seen Holly and I speak before, as you'll see on the picture next to Holly that we included Karen, it's usually the Holly, Karen, and Jen show. And we are pretty fun in person. I'm not quite sure how it will translate online, but we will try our best. With that being said, I'm going to ask everyone to share in the chat if you had to describe yourself using, if you were a food, what would that food be? How would you describe yourself? So for example, I usually like to say I think I'd be mashed potatoes. And it was funny because Holly, oh no, maybe it was Karen that literally went on and said, "Well, yeah, that's a great one. You're comforting. Who doesn't like mashed potatoes? They go down easy, easy to digest." And I thought, well, that's the perfect description of me on most days. Holly, what was yours?
Spicy pineapple salsa. It's very descriptive. I understand that. Because sometimes I can be really kind and sweet. I think most of the time I'm kind and sweet, but I can also be very spicy. Especially when you catch me on one of those days or I'm really fighting for something that's important. I can be spicy and I am sometimes all over the place and have a million things going on. So that's why it's salsa because there's all the things in it. So I am spicy pineapple salsa.
And I totally forgot to share that this was going to be a waterfall activity, but I love how quickly you all jumped in there and are putting in all the foods now that are making me, oh, a warm chocolate chip cookie, funfetti cupcake. I don't
Okay, I want
know
to know
you,
about the
Rachel,
prime
but
rib.
I'm thinking you might be our people with that description. Um,
Does
oh, Katie, soup, warm, comforting with surprising ingredients. I love that.
Can I, if you don't want to share, I would love to know about the prime rib if that individual would like to share.
Did not see that one.
Yeah, Alfredo pasta, raspberry Danish. I love these.
I just think highly of myself.
I love it.
I love that. Mac and cheese, so comforting. I
Oh,
love this.
Emily, I love your description. Sushi,
What,
to some, I am an acquired taste, but if you love and trust me, I can be a consistent and fun treat. I love that. Like,
Kaylee
anybody else
talk,
want to
you are my
share?
person. French fries or any form of potato. I love this. Anyone else want to share Evie, did you put in a food there? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I said freshly baked muffins because I'm warm and sweet.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, I was going to be funny and say a little crusty on top, but no, you're never crusty. You're always sweet.
That
I
is
have my moments. I think you guys have probably seen some of those. That's really good.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today on this wonderful last session. Holly and I, everything we do is about young people, and we are always excited to share that with people, with others. We have a few objectives today that you can also read on your screen, but you will see these interwoven throughout our session. Um, Adult advisor techniques. Obviously, we want you guys to have takeaways to develop some of those techniques that are going to help you empower your peer leaders. It's all about empowering, encouraging that engagement, that peer leader ownership, some strategies to help with that. And also, we're going to dive a little into KSAs, which I'm not sure if many of you are aware of what those are, but basically, it's just to increase the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of young people to improve their overall outcomes. And as I said before, please feel to unmute, raise a hand, or ask a question.
So the big question is like, why are we here? Why are you guys here? We are here because we want to be able to share information with you and techniques that we have learned over the past many years. Not only just in sources, but in a lot of the other work that we do. And I'll get into that in a second. One of the things that we always talk about during the trainings, and hopefully everybody that has been through a training has heard about peer leader ownership, right? And so I threw these graphs up here because I think this is one of the things that people just kind of fly through and they're like, oh yeah, they'll take more ownership and you move on. But really what we have found is the more ownership that young people take, the less the adults have to take on. And the more that there's buy-in, the more things that the peer leaders do. And so it's really important that we actually do focus on what are those skills, what are those techniques, what knowledge can we give our students and our peer leaders so that they can create more ownership of the sources program, and that in turn gives less for the adults to have to maintain and manage and do. And so I just wanted to throw these on here because I do think that as you're moving through so whether you've been in sources, like this is your first year and you're like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I am carrying absolutely the load for everybody and everything. I am sorry, but you're doing great. That is not uncommon. But as you progress in the years, you tend to hopefully give more peer leader ownership, and that's less that you have to take on. Because we know that you guys have a million things. You're exhausted, you're tired, you just have so much stuff. So I just wanted to stop and point that out. The other thing that I do want to mention is that with the model that Sources has put together, you see the peer leadership going up, adult ownership going down. One of the things that I do want to say is, like, if you have a huge turnover in your population of students, if you sometimes we have schools that like couldn't fund or whatever, they had to skip a year and they restarted, or they lost too many adult advisors or whatever that case is, you may have to move back down and start more towards year one and get things up and running. And that's okay, because it's never just consistently at 4 years. Once you hit 4 years, it's going to be a moving graph. The other thing, and I'm going to disagree very kindly with Sources on this, is the middle school model. I truly believe that the middle school students, and from my experience in working with youth led in middle school, young people can take ownership and do things and collect data just as much as a high school student. I've even had elementary students take ownership and collect data and do all of those sorts of things and take ownership in a program. So I don't fully 100% agree with the graph for middle school, but in a typical middle school, that probably is what it looks like. So to give you guys a little bit of background about Jen and I, is so many years ago, about 11 years ago, the state of Ohio kind of created this thing called youth led, right? Youth led programs. And so we have been on the ground floor since Youth Led has started in Ohio. And so that is where a lot of our experience comes from. If you've heard of Youth Led, just give me a thumbs up. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's cool. All right, so some of you know what
Awesome.
that is. Perfect, perfect. All right, so one of the great things about Youth Led, if you don't know what it is, it's where you work with young people in a strategic planning process to create positive community change around themselves or around their school. And so it's really a strategic way of being change agents. It's creating change. And so from our experience in the past 11 years of doing Youth Led, coming into Sources, which was honestly just a natural transition for Jennie and I and Karen, but was a natural transition for us because Sources is a lot of what Youth Led is. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that we've learned through Youth Led that we tend to try to share and bring into Sources of Strength secondary program. Like I said, there is a strategic planning process. I fully recommend that if you are running Sources group, that you become familiar with the SPIF, the Strategic Prevention Framework, because there is ways that you can use the SPIF to help guide some of that process when you're doing campaigns. I'm not going to go into detail too much about it, but some of the bigger pieces is that assessment piece, like what data do you have, your capacity, like what do you guys have the ability to do? What do your young people have the ability to do? Because sometimes they come up with ideas that are like way out here and you're like, I have no idea how we're going to do that. And so how do we create a space that we don't tell them no, but we bring in capacity? Like what do we have the capacity to do? And then planning, implementation, and then evaluation, which is, I think a lot of times we don't do in Sources because we're like, okay, next campaign, let's get to the next thing. But evaluating, like, what are we doing? Did it reach your target population? Did as many kids participate as you would like? How successful was it? And just kind of moving from there to use some of that to help with the next campaign to make sure that you're reaching the target population that you want to with your campaigns, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
So based on all the years of experience with Youth Led, it seemed like a pretty natural transition for us to Sources. And we were so excited to learn that Sources secondary model really utilizes utilizes peers as leaders. I'm sure many of you, if you've gone through a Sources of Strength training, you've seen this slide about bridging the gaps in prevention. And I think sometimes, especially those of you that have maybe done a training year after year, I don't know that this one always gets as much attention as it should. And I think it's a good reminder that Sources is strength based. It is focused on strengths, not on those risk factors or those deficits that young people don't have. It is all about hope, help, and strength. If you work in communities like we do, sometimes it's hard to advocate for programs that are prevention programs, but Sources of Strength and their messaging is so positive, that strength-based messaging, that I think sometimes it's more accepting in our school communities. It doesn't sit with that sad shock trauma. Any of you that work with young people know if you've had a group of students and they start sharing their traumatic experiences, it's one after another after another. And then Sources does a really good job of pivoting and focusing on those strengths. And that peer leader, that peer-led portion is so big. It's, many programs that we do in schools are adult driven. And in a minute here, Holly's going to go over kind of the progression of that youth voice and how it changes over time. And using those peer leaders is really going to improve overall ownership of your Sources group, the engagement of your group. And sometimes this can be challenging for adults because we're not always used to letting young people lead and letting them have a voice and a space to express that voice. So everything that we do, we always ask, well, what did the young people say? What do young people want? And always trying to bring in that voice that is often overlooked.
So the progression of youth voice, you may have seen this in different ways, or with different terms and whatnot. But basically, progression of youth voice is they're starting off at volunteerism and they move up towards youth empowered. Now, I want you guys to just take a second and think of your group, right? So when we typically start off with sources of strength, a lot of times you're just asking them to show up, right? It's like, you just have faith in me, show up. We're going to have a fun day. We're going to do some cool stuff. And you're really just trying to get them to show up to what you're doing, right? To show up to the training. And so sometimes it's not always necessarily like they come in and they're super empowered and they're ready to go. Hopefully by the time they leave, they're feeling more empowered, but there's a process that we have to take them through. And so volunteerism is like, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? You have a group of students who are there, they're volunteering, they're helping. It could be maybe somebody comes with their friend that's a peer leader and they're just volunteering at a dodgeball tournament, right? And so they're there, they're participating, they're volunteering, they're helping. That might be a way that you get a young person in the door and then you start to move them up into your sources group. We also have Youth Informed, which is where youth inform our process, right? They tell us like, hey, here's some ideas that I have. But it could also be like the YRBS or data collection, like any of those sorts of things that we're just getting their input, but we're not really letting them share too much. Youth Involved is a youth involved adult driven, which is where youth are involved, but they have the adults telling them what to do, right? And so I'm going to relate this to a very, no offense if anybody runs like a NHS or any of those like volunteer organizations or groups in a school, but it's very much like, hey, we're going to do this drive this week. And, we're going to do a toy drive over the holidays. And so the youth are involved and they're participating, but they're told what to do by the adult, right? This is where I see a lot of times we start with our sources group, or when people call and they're like, we're having trouble with our group and we're not getting a lot of buy-in and the peer leaders don't seem to want to take ownership. If young people are always being told what to do, they're not always going to take ownership of it. And this is where we see a lot of our adult advisors sitting sometimes is in the space of like, well, I told them that we were doing this campaign and I don't know why they're not happy about it. They said they liked it. And so it's really understanding like there's nothing wrong with that, but taking that and saying, maybe I should adjust it next time to allow them to have more youth voice in it and not me being the driver as the adult. Youth driven, it's where the young people are the drivers, but the adults are in a supportive role, but not guiding them. And that's where Youth Empowered comes in, because when a young person feels empowered, they are the ones that are coming up with the ideas. They're coming up with the initiatives. They're the ones that are coming into you and saying, hey, I know we're supposed to do this activity and I have another idea and can we do this? And they're invested, like they are in it to win it, right? Like they are so in it. But they're also doing it in a strategic way. So it's not just, you're not just throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. You're not just telling them yes on absolutely everything, but you're using it in a strategic way to work it into your campaigns, to layer your campaigns. And the difference between youth driven and youth empowered is that the adult is guiding and supporting and in the empowerment. In the youth driven, they just kind of like, they're there to support them, but they don't guide them in the process. When we're empowering young people, we're guiding them in the process. We're helping support them. So I just want to take a breath for a second. And I want you, I know, sorry, I talk really fast. And I want you guys to just take a second and look at this and really truly self-evaluate. Like, where do you think your sources group sits on this spectrum?
And just know there is immense value in any level of this progression. Even getting young people involved at the table to do something that's a volunteer project is huge. And as you go through your sources groups, my guess is many of you have been doing this for 3, 4, 5 years. You've had significant changes in your groups. Maybe it started out and then transitioned to more of a youth empowered, really that peer-led group. And now you have all new kids, new adult advisors, and then it's a heavier lift and more guided by the adults. So there's no good or bad place to be on the progression. As long as you're involving young people and we're not harming them, then you're doing okay. So
So if
did you want them to share, Hall?
I was just gonna say, if you feel comfortable enough to either unmute and share, if you want to throw it in the chat, we would just love to see where you guys are at. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kate.
I mean, I love that we're seeing so many youth involved.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, solidly youth involved. My friends, that is a huge battle of itself and a huge undertaking to get youth involved in something like sources.
Absolutely. And so what we're hoping to do throughout the remainder of our session, and especially in the next couple of slides, is hopefully give some tools, some experiences, some mottos that we live by to help. Again, there's no wrong space on here, but to help give more ownership, right? Because that's the whole point, is to give more ownership to our peer leaders and take more of that ownership off of you, if that makes sense. So.
Oh, Jonathan, I love that. So Jonathan says he's been trying to run groups twice a week, come up with different topics. Majority of the ones he wrote came up with had some buy-in. This week is more youth driven as it's a Q&A about job readiness. I would like to be more youth involved next week. I love that. And I'm curious to see how your youth participate and engage when it's topics that they are interested in. I mean, I'm sure we've all been there, folks, where we've designed some wonderful thing, program, lesson, whatever, that we think is going to be fabulous and everyone's going to love it. And it just completely fails, right? It falls way short. It's not perceived well. It's the kids don't get it. It's not funny, whatever the case may be. And that's why it's so important to involve them in the ideas, in the decision making. Anyone else want to share anything else? I love that so many youth involved.
I love that. Right.
Okay, so how do we get our young people to have more ownership in these groups? We did this as nicely as we could. We put, shh, just listen. Can I just get a raise of hand if anyone on here has done an adult advisor training or a peer leader training? Okay. Not that I don't love adults, but there's been many a times where we've left a training and I've said, oh my gosh, those kids are wonderful, but man, the adults are a barrier, sort of, right? And I think sometimes we just need to be reminded to listen, to really just be quiet and listen to what the young people are sharing, what they are saying. It is not in our nature to listen, especially if we are helpers and doers. And my teachers, if I have any educators that are on this, I think you struggled the most with sitting back and letting them lead and believing that youth can be experts in something. We do not know it all. If you talk to people that don't work with young people, they don't understand why we could ever love working with middle schoolers. They have so much to teach us, so much to teach us. And then never say no.
I'm gonna jump right in real quick.
Okay.
So I think it's challenging because I think it's challenging for teachers, and I'm gonna expand on what Jen said, because teachers' success is measured by the outcome, right? And so they have to make sure that students are performing, make sure that they get high enough scores and grades and all of the things. And so it's like, if they don't do good, I don't do good. And so it's really hard because they have to take control of their classroom. They have to be the ones to say, this is what we need to do to get to where we need to go. And so the idea of letting a young person just kind of take, I don't want to say take over, but take that and be the expert is really challenging. And because teaching and facilitating are two very different things. And I think sometimes we forget that. And when we bring adult advisors in, they're most of the time they're good. Sometimes not so much, but most of the time they're good, right? And so a lot of times they have this, they want to be there, they want to help the students, but we just may not know how. And so I think the just listen. I have to tell you guys a story. We were in a training and we told them, like, let the students come up with the campaign ideas. We were in a middle school doing a training. Let the students come up with the ideas. Let them, like, they're going to come up with the most crazy ideas you'll ever think of, but let them do it. And we had a couple adults that would not let the students speak. And they were over there and they were writing and they were telling them. And Jennie very kindly, because she's the kind one, very kindly went over and put them in timeout and put the adult in timeout and said, shh, you're now in timeout. You can no longer talk. And we did this. And then, yeah, it was really, I thought it was funny. The adult took it very well. And she was like, you're right. I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But then once she stepped back and the students took over, like we like moved her way away, the students took over, and you should have seen the ideas that they came up with. She's like, wow, I didn't know they could, like, that's a great idea. I didn't know they were going to do that. And it's like, we need to give them that space. We have to trust that they're the experts in knowing what they need, right? They may not know all the stats and the statistics, but like they know what young people need. And so we always have to stop and listen to that and think, like, sometimes when they have really dumb ideas, or you're like, oh, again, this is actually the same group. They had this brilliant idea. They were all going to get front row tickets to Taylor Swift. You see, all of them, all 60 of them were going to get front row tickets to Taylor Swift. And then they were going to hold up a sources sign. And she was then going to promote sources from the stage at her concert. And while this seems like a brilliant idea by middle school students, part of us is like, how is that going to happen, right? And so that's where the never say no comes into play. And it's really hard, right? It's really hard because you want to be like, there's no way. How are we going to do that? So at the beginning, when we talked about the spiff, the flower looking thing, capacity, right? Capacity is, what do we have the ability to do? And so the more that we tell students, no, 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 like, no, you can't do that. No, you don't have the money for that. The more that they feel defeated, the more that they feel like, oh, they don't want to listen to me. They don't care. My ideas are stupid, right? And so they start doing that inner talk. And so us as adult advisors, not telling them no, but asking strategic questions starts to change that mind frame. So never saying no doesn't mean you're going to let them do everything they want. Never saying no means like, wow, that is an amazing idea to all go to Taylor Swift. So quick question. Where do you think we could get money to pay for that? And then if we do get money, how do you think that's going to promote sources at your school? Right. And so you start asking them, well, I don't know if it would promote at our school. Okay. So like, what may be something that you could use Taylor Swift-ish and promote it at your school, right? And so you're asking strategic questions to where they actually narrow it down, and they had a really good campaign that they did in-house where they didn't go to Taylor Swift, right? And so it's strategically asking questions, but never saying no, because the second you say no, you become the bad guy, right? And so just, how do we ask those questions? How do we ask the capacity? Like, what, do we really have time to put on a dodgeball tournament by Friday and it is Wednesday? How do you think we could get that approved and done by then, right? And so again, it's, how do you strategically ask the questions?
And I think these are all, good tools to use in supporting your adult advisors, because I think they need just as much support and guidance as the students do. Like Evie said, the adults are always the ones that want to be helpful. They want to jump in and pass things out and be the one to record when we're doing strengths posters. But really shifting that to encouraging the young people to be more involved is huge. Becky, are you a teacher, an educator? I just saw that you said you do struggle with limited schedules, policies, stretch schedules when we hit on the teachers and how they can struggle sometimes. And Christy, poor Christy. Oh, school psych. Okay, thank you. Had to stop asking the adults to come to the youth summits because they took over all of the activities. Yeah, but we still need those adults. We need them as champions and allies and cheerleaders for these young people because they are young. Their brains are not developed. They cannot do all this on their own. But that's why it's so important that we are there to guide them. A few more things that we have this is U-Haul, learned
It
along
is.
the way.
Yes. So a few more things that we have learned along the way is let them do it. Now, I know the let them do it and it's okay to let them fail. This is a really hard lesson, again, because we want to help students succeed. However, if we always do everything for them, are they ever going to build resiliency? Are they ever going to really truly learn? When my little ones were learning to walk, every time that they fell over, if I just picked them up and held them and picked them up and held them and they didn't, and I walked them, would they have ever learned to walk? Right? And so it's okay to let them fail because that's how they build resiliency. That's how they build these workforce development skills that we all talk about that they need, right? These life skills that everybody's like, well, young people don't have that anymore. We need to let them fail. You have to. But we also have to let them do it. And I know these are hard because we have a district that we've worked with, and for many years we have had some challenging adults, right? And so the district has the adult advisor has been like, well, I can't let them fail because then I fail. And it's like, but I know that that's a hard thing, right? And as long as they're doing stuff and getting it out there, that's where we have to find the small wins, right? And so yes, they may do this huge thing and it might stink or it might flop or not, nobody might participate. That's okay. That's where then again, going back to the spiff, when you evaluate what worked, what didn't work, why do we think that we had some challenges with this campaign? What could we do better next time? And so you're using the skills of strategic planning to help them figure out like what worked, what didn't work. Right. And you know what? Hey guys, you know what? That wasn't the greatest. That's totally fine. It happens to all of us. How are we going to do better next time? What are we going to do? I know that a lot of people are worried, like, well, this is fulfilling House Bill 123, so I have to do these things. Again, as you guys heard earlier, yes, a lot of you are using this for House Bill 123. It needs to be, you need to have all the things. But if you really look at all the campaigns they do throughout the year, you need 1 hour, which again, we know is not enough, but you need 1 hour for the entire school year. And so if you do several campaigns, if they fail at this one and not everybody does it, that's okay, right? You can make up those hours. So, because we have a lot of schools that are like, well, we need to fulfill House Bill 128, like we have to do it. You're still doing the work. You're just letting them learn through the process. The other thing is you have to let them do it. So what that looks like is, hey, we have our meeting, we have planning, and let's say this group is working on, they're doing some sort of campaign and they have to do flyers and they have to reach out to the principal and they need to for approval and they have to do all these steps. Then the students should be the ones doing that. Who's reaching out to the principal? Make sure I'm on it as the adult advisor. Who is the one that's going to make up the flyer? Okay, it's going to, what day do you want that done by? And so you're doing that. And I will tell you, there's times where we've done this and we show up to a meeting and they never did it. And then they all look at us and they're like, well, we didn't do it. So did you do it? No, I didn't do it. As the adult advisor, I did not do it. If you guys want to do this, then you have to do it. I will help, I will guide, I will support, but you as the young person have to do it, right? And so it's helping them through that because again, if we do everything for them, they will never learn. So let them do it. Don't always just let them email your administration and surprise them. Give your admin a heads up. Just gonna throw that out there. And then again, finding
It's okay to proof the emails
yes,
and review, but we don't have to write them.
correct. And then the small wins. What are the small wins? And if anybody knows the elementary curriculum, they call it celebrations. So find those small wins and celebrate them, right? Even if you waited 4 meetings for somebody to write an email to the principal and they finally did, celebrate it, right? Celebrate it. Whatever those small wins are, celebrate them. Because I think sometimes we just think, well, this whole thing maybe didn't go as we planned. So like, but what did go as we planned? And let's take some time to honor that.
And small wins might be that you have really good attendance at your meetings, or you have students that didn't speak during the training and the first few meetings, and now they're feeling more comfortable and they're sharing, or they're, expressing their ideas. So if you could just take a minute and think about a small win that you've had with either a sources group or a training or one of your peer leaders or one of your adult advisors, we would love to hear it. If you don't want to unmute, if you could just type it in the chat, we would love to celebrate some of those small wins with you. I love seeing peer leaders open over the course of a training. Yes. We've done trainings and I've had students come in and you can just tell they would like to sink into the wall or the ground if at all possible. And by the end, they're saying things like, I finally feel like I fit somewhere. I finally feel like I'm with some people that I can be myself. It's huge.
I always love seeing when they like Jen said, they either come in and they just like are shrunken and they're just like, oh my gosh, or they're all clustered with their friends that may be in there with them. But then by the end, everybody's sitting with somebody. Like I love to see how many students are in different seats by the end of the day, by choice.
Students
Love
asking more
that.
leaders be accepted. I love that. I love that. We've gotten ourselves in some trouble in some schools because we always like to say we don't like to exclude anyone, right? Because Sources of Strength is all about building connections and belonging. And if you have students that want to invite friends, peers in, how do we turn them away and say, no, you can't be a part of this group that's all about building connections and welcoming and belonging and improving our school culture and climate. So I love that. We've had many schools that have gone to almost a peer leader nomination of expanding their group, which I think is wonderful, especially for those groups that, you've done it a few years, you've lost some, you need some new, you're just not tapping into all the different groups. Um, that can be really powerful. A group of our students want to take on formal leadership roles next year. I love Heather. We got to talk about that. I love that. I love that. Do you want to share more about that, Heather? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure, I can. Yeah, so Holly and Jennie, you guys know my struggles over the past several years. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of that turnover with students, and we are having some of that this year too. But we had a group of probably 2 or 3 students who definitely love being involved and they want something that they can really put on their resume. So they were kind of campaigning for, well, could we do like a president, vice president type of a thing? And so we kind of had some conversations and it was at trying to like lead towards, well, Sources is supposed to be a little like more inclusive. So instead of having fully that top down, but a little more of like a youth advisory type of a council where there's a little bit more of that shared leadership, and they seem to be on board with that. So it's still kind of a good compromise, a meet in the middle, still trying to keep Sources goals in mind, but also give them a little bit of what they were looking for, where they could actually put some leadership stuff on their resumes.
Thank you. Thank you. Has anyone else, utilized their peer leaders and they've formed more of a those leadership roles?
I just mentioned that a lot of the schools that I've trained have mentioned wanting to move more towards something like that because they've got a lot of students that want to be involved, but they do not want to take part in planning or brainstorming. If you tell them be present at 7 o'clock in the morning with chalk in your hand, they will be there. They do not want to spend 30 minutes trying to fill out a to-do list and figuring out action items and stuff. And so I think giving that space for students that want to be more involved in the planning while still working hard to get buy-in on the activities that people have selected within the larger group meetings has been really helpful. Plus, for schools that have difficulty balancing schedules and finding a time for everybody to meet as peer leaders, it seems like it's a little bit easier if they have that student leadership group meet more frequently and then have the wider group meet maybe a couple of times a semester.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to get into, more as you see, and Holly mentioned those practical skills, those life skills. But one of the big things that we noticed is, and I'm sure you've all seen this as well, the campaign modalities, is those small wins are huge and they are important. But building on those small wins using multiple strategies, modalities can be very impactful. And I think the one thing we see repeatedly with many of the schools that we've trained and supported in Sources of Strength is the young people design these fabulous campaigns or have these fabulous ideas, and they don't connect it to the why. Well, why would a school dodgeball tournament be supportive in promoting sources of strength? Like, in what way? And a lot of times it'll come back to, well, it's a healthy activity. Well, absolutely, it's a healthy activity, but why? What's the why of why we want to do this school-wide event or this particular campaign? Because I think a lot of times, and I notice it in trainings, it seems to be, well, it's going to be easy to get things approved like posters or morning announcements. But how do we utilize those multiple strategies, those multiple modalities when we're looking at layering our campaigns? And I think that, again, asking the why and continuing to ask the why is so important. The other big part of this is, we know one and dones don't work in the prevention world. So you have to put messages out using different forms, different modalities. One of the things we like to really encourage the adult advisors that we work with is tap into your students' strengths. We will say this at a peer leader training. When it comes time to do some campaign planning, we will say, okay, think back to that strengths poster that you did. What are some of your sources of strength? Because for many, you're going to see that they use art, music, video, games. Maybe they love public speaking. Maybe they're a huge sports fanatic, or they're part of the school's, football team or track team that's really successful, and they love that team, those team activities. Maybe they love to do videos and post them on social media. They have so many skills that we do not. And I think we don't allow them always to really utilize their own strengths when they're working on those sources of strength campaigns. So if you've really done the work and you've recruited every corner, every culture, every connection like Sources recommends, then most likely you are going to have students that if you do a full school dodgeball tournament, they aren't going to want to plan it. They're not going to want to participate in it. They do not like sports on any level, but they might be really artistic and they might love to draw posters or do a mural or something of Sources or some sort of advertisement for the dodgeball tournament. Or you might have a student that loves to public speak that can do your announcements about the dodgeball tournament and how it's related to sources of strength. So really layering the messaging, having multiple ways to address campaigns that are going to involve the majority of your peer leaders. Because if your peer leaders aren't willing to get involved in the planning and the implementing of these campaigns, it's going to be hard to expect the student body to, because your peer leaders are a representation of your student body. And if they're invested, they're going to want to if they're invested and interested, they're going to take more ownership and they're going to be more engaged. And then maybe we're working on a campaign that they're not really that into. Well, then they can also be working on, Holly, you had a good example of this the other day when we were talking about how you don't have to wait for the campaign that you want to work on as a peer leader. You can be invested and do things throughout. I think that's where the layering comes in as well.
And I think that's where, again, increasing peer leader ownership is the more that you can give them that they feel related to, right? And that's why we're talking about layering, because again, we see a lot of times where it's like, I'm going to do a dodgeball tournament. And like, that's their getting the word out about Sources, or that's their mentor madness, or whatever the case is, but there's no other parts around that. And so then you have one group of students, potentially like 5, 10 kids, 15 kids, how many ever, that are planning it. But what about the rest of your Sources team? That your rest of your peer leaders that are waiting for that event to happen before you can go to the next campaign or something like that. Because a lot of times when we help schools like troubleshoot some of the things that are going on, it's, well, this is the campaign we're working on and this is what we're doing. But you've left off a majority of your peer leaders or who don't feel invested because that's not something they have an interest in. And so that's why we're talking about using different modalities to layer a campaign to really help support their interest, what they have in their buy-in.
Because ultimately, and if we go to the next slide, Holly, you will see the strengths that they bring to your group are real life skills that they're going to use now and into their future. And I know the buzzwords, it used to be 21st century skills or something like that. Now it's the workforce development. It's just those real life practical skills, excuse me, that they're going to need moving on into the world. And if you look at this list, there's really none that I can see that they couldn't learn or begin to learn about through being a peer leader. And if you think about all the campaigns you've planned, even just running a meeting.
And, and going back into the ownership and buy-in, let them run a meeting. Let them pick the sharing prompt. Let them pick the music for the day. Let them pick the game for the day. Like all of those tiny little things are ways to get more buy-in from your students, to make them feel like, oh, this really is my group, that I am a piece of this.
We've had adult advisors that organize these beautiful Google Sheets with the meeting dates and who's going to lead that meeting as the adult advisor and what the sharing prompt is going to be and what the game's going to be. It's okay to create that, but allow your students to fill in some of that too. What games would they like to play? What do they want to do a sharing prompt around?
KSAs. Anybody ever know KSAs? Knowledge, skills, attitudes? Yeah.
If anyone has met our counterpart, Karen Lackey, you've probably talked to her and heard her say the word KSA or the letters KSA. It's all about knowledge, skills, and attitudes.
Right. So one of the things that we really want to stop and think about is we have different ways to look at this. And so I'm going to ask you guys to look at your peer leaders as a whole, right? So think about the peer leaders that you currently have or the peer leaders that you will be having next year. And I want you to think, like, what are some of those things that you want those students to learn? Because yes, as important as it is, to come in and do campaigns and stuff like that, again, we're talking about those skills. We're talking about that buy-in. So what knowledge do you want young people to have that are in your group? What do you want your peer leaders to know, to understand, to be able to share with a friend? Is it you want them to understand when they can, like, here's what's going to happen when you connect somebody to help. Like, here's the process that goes through when you connect someone to help, right? Like, what is that piece of knowledge that you would like your young person to know? And so we're going to ask you guys to just on your own write it on a piece of paper. You can think it in your head. I prefer you write it down, but I know some people probably aren't even listening right now, so that's okay. But just go ahead and if you could write it down, just write down K and think, what knowledge do you want your young people to know? Like, what do you want them to walk away with next year? Right? So again, I gave you an example of like when I reach out, I want my young people to know when they reach out for help, here's the process of what happens when they reach out for help. Because a lot of young people are still scared to reach out because they don't know what's going to happen. They think they're going to be pink slipped and sent to the hospital and locked up. And so here's the process if we have to call 988. Here's what's going to happen if you reach out to a trusted adult, right? We're going to keep you safe. We're going to make sure everything's okay, right? And so just them understanding that that's a piece of knowledge that they need to understand. If you would like to throw your knowledge into the chat, we would love to see it.
I love that, Evie. You allow them to do some of the grant reviews, look over, see what good prevention looks like, so they can fund it. I love that.
Yeah, we had great conversations. The way that they were talking about, well, do we want to pay for t-shirts? Do we want to pay for stipends? Do we want to pay for food? The number of conversations that I've had with adults that are having those same questions was a good reminder to me about not taking for granted the way that young people are able to observe and assess value, even for something like public taxpayer dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just jump in and add something verbally, if that's okay.
Thank you,
But just kind of
Sarah.
like general people knowledge, right? Like, so who are your school counselors and like where are they and how do you get there and some of that like wayfinding stuff. So I've seen some schools have some great success with like older kids, kind of helping the younger kiddos with that.
Love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, during trainings, we're always asking who are the adults in the building that you would prefer, would trust, and feel safe going to if you needed to connect to help or for yourself or for a friend. And the amount of times I hear young people mention someone and the other young people will say, who? I didn't know we had a social worker that worked at our school. I didn't know we had someone from a behavioral health center that's here regularly, or I don't even know who my counselor is because the only time I see them is really if I have to schedule something, especially at that high school level. So that's huge. Because we can't expect them to encourage themselves and others to reach out for help if we're not equipping them with the resources of what that looks like and where to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We have one more in the chat. Sorry, I already hit the button. I
Oh,
don't know how to go
sorry.
back. No, it's okay. I don't know how to go back. So we'll just
Know what resources are available to them as students and in the wider community for when they move on. Yes. How do we prepare them for that transition, either, you know, out into the real world or as they go off to college, the workforce, the military?
summer.
No, summer. Yes. What are those resources? So important. So important.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So skills. The skills. What skills can we teach our young people, right? So what is one skill that you want your peer leaders to learn next year? So an example would be, and again, this doesn't have to be huge, massive things. An example would be, my peer leaders will learn to check their sources Google Classroom at the end
For
of each
updates.
day. That's a skill. A skill would be to check your Google Classroom at the end of each day or to check their emails at the end of each day. And we tell students, like, when you get out into the real world, you're going to have to check your emails. You're going to have to respond to people when they put things out to you. And so it's like, what can those skills be? And I mean, it could be bigger, but like, just think, it can be across the board.
Yes, Kathy,
Yes.
collaboration, problem solving, teamwork, communication about timelines, ownership and accountability, all of those skills that we need in life to be successful, right? And to survive and thrive. Managing their time and schedules. Love it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And the last one is attitude. So what is one attitude shift you want your peer leaders to have next year? Now, this is where it gets hard because if they don't have if they have the knowledge and they may have the skills, but if they don't feel it, right? If they don't feel it, then is that really going to are they going to give us much effort? Is it going to make much of a difference? Which is why I think sources trainings are so important because they come in going like, well, yeah, I believe in this, or I really want to help support this. But then by the end of it, especially when you have like a trainer that's really in it, right? By the end of it, they should know, like, they feel it. And you can see that they feel it at the end of the training. They're like, oh, this is really good. I'm going to make a difference. Like, they feel it. So what is that attitude shift that you want to see with your young people? Or your peers?
And a lot of times it's what they share with other young people.
Mm-hmm.
Greater confidence in themselves.
Yes.
Absolutely. Staying positive. A mind shift from what's in it for me and what can I get from it to what can I bring to it and how can I make it better. I love that. The power of impacting their school culture. Yes, that's another huge part of, you know, when we do our trainings is talking about them being change agents. How do they want their school culture and community to look? And because there's never a perfect one. And they always will say, you know, they come up with some really good ideas on how to improve that. And sometimes the attitude is the first place to start. Mm-hmm. And the courage to try. Thank you.
So what I'm just going to throw out there is and I know we have like 2 minutes left. So what I'm just going to throw out there is that there's different ways to like look at your group and develop KSAs, right? So You could do your entire sources group. You can do by individual peer leaders. You could do by your entire adult advisor team. Like, where are my adults right now? What do they need knowledge in? What skills do they need? And what attitude shift do they need? And then yourself as an adult advisor. And sometimes reflecting on our own is the hardest. But we encourage you guys to kind of look at your sources as a whole and take the KFAs back and think, like, what can we do to structure some of these things next year? And with that, we have a minute. I'm sorry if you have questions.
Our contact information is there. Please feel free to reach out. We love hearing from schools that are doing sources of strength. Thank you, everyone, very much for
Yes,
spending the
thank you,
time with
guys.
us.